Welcome. My name is Rubadiri Victor, and I'm here doing a reading from my new novella, Anansi and the Book of Night. This is chapter 3 from the book. If you go online for Anansi and the Book of Night, you will see me doing reading of the first 2 chapters. So let me catch you up. Anansi has been called in by the Kingdom of Bats to find out about the whereabouts of their king who has disappeared, leaving only an outline of dust on the ground. She finds out subsequently from her husband, the Lion Prince, that the bees have also started disappearing. This is along with the disappearance of a number of other bats at the same time. So Anansi, now addled by all these multiplying disappearances, goes to the kingdom of the bees, or the queendom of the bees, to find out what more she could find out to solve this growing mystery. So, chapter 3 of Anansi and the Book of Night, the Fat Animals. This was madness. An entire bee squadron. Anansi was walking over to the bees' hive, the massive palace and catacombs of their mini kingdom. She had sent ahead to ask for an audience with the queen. There must be some clue, some reason. Were there secret feuds afoot in the kingdom where animals were now settling scores in this terrifying way? The bee queen knew nearly everything that went on in a tightly structured realm. Everyone reported to someone, and all those someones reported to her. Anansi heard the hive before she saw it. The hum that began as a distant drum beat now was a constant hammer. As she approached the entrance to the honeycomb, some lead workers came out to her and escorted her in. Anansi went deeper into the hive, almost lost in the infinity of combs and overpowered by the smell of honey. Finally, she was ushered into the large chamber of the queen. Dozens of workers were on one side of the throne with dozens of drones on the next. The throne was high off the ground, and the queen was laying eggs. "Your Majesty," Anansi curtsied. Weeks passed, and it was getting worse in many, many ways. More bats and bees were disappearing all the time. Families had been diminished. Both sets of animals were now scared to leave their caves or nests or go anywhere by themselves. The beautiful pollination processions of the bees by day and bats by night were now fraught with danger. Even moving in large batches brought no safety. Large camps of bats had been disappeared together. There was terror in the air. But sadly, for some animals, it was a bat and bee problem. But the vanishings had other consequences. The disappearances of the 2 animals that pollinated so many plants in the day and night had led to a crisis of fruits and flowers. Soon there was drought and a food shortage. If this continued, entire parts of the forest would collapse. The kingdom had even started using food from its storehouses. Anansi began to notice that whilst most animals were getting thinner, certain animals were in fact getting fatter. She also began to notice that these fat animals had a tendency to hail one another out and stop and speak in secrecy when they thought no one was looking. As time went on, Anansi also noticed these fat animals gathering suspiciously in larger groups, talking excitedly amongst themselves. Something was afoot. Brer Hawk, who normally was warrior fit and one of the council of elders, in fact had himself gotten pretty fat as of late and seemed particularly pleased with himself. Anansi decided to follow Hawk one day when the fat animals all seemed most animated. Hawk left the council chambers early in the afternoon with Brer Snake and others, and they seemed to split up purposefully, almost as if to make a point to onlookers that they were not traveling together. Anansi hung close to Hawk. Hawk took a long route through the outskirts of the inner forest and then strangely circled back to arrive close to where he had first started. He then cut a path through high bush and then through a long, narrow, lonely stand of trees. He stopped where the trees ended, sliced by a long, straight path carrying on to the horizon. It was guarded on his side by towers of conifers, and on the other by mixed forests. Hawk walked across the path into a clump of dead trees that stood leafless except for a massive immortal tree, aflame with dark red flowers on its crown. Hawk flew up to the branches of the immortal tree, hid, and waited. Soon enough, the same bred snake from the council that Hawk had just left came down the path, turned in by the large immortal, and disappeared past the dead trees into the bush. One by one, some of the other fat animals and council members made their way to the bush and disappeared down the same path. Brer Rat passed and seemed to be the last attendee. After about 10 minutes, Hawk flew down and disappeared into the bush himself. Anansi followed. Hawk wound his way through brush until he came upon a series of large stone pillars overrun with oleander. He then said something, and one of the large pillars moved for him to enter and then closed. Anansi ran around and found a crack in the join of the massive stones, peered in. The fat animals and council members were in a large open-top room. In the middle was a stone table, massive, covered in moss. Around the stone table were 13 stone chairs, all occupied. At the center of the long stone table sat Tiger Cat. With him were representatives of the small houses of cats, birds, rodents, and snakes, including council of elder members, Brer Hawk, Brer Cat, Sister Rat, Brer Snake, Sister Snake, Brer Scorpion, and Brer Hammerhead. "Hawk, why are you late?" barked Tiger Cat. "I actually was here first, hiding in the trees above the entrance. I like to arrive first and walk in last to meetings such as this, to see if any of you were followed," said Hawk slyly. Everyone laughed and shook their heads at this. Then Tiger Cat struck the stone table with his massive paws. "Okay, enough. Let us call this meeting to order. We know why we are all here. It is time to overthrow Brer Lion and take the throne."